It was acceptable for women to participate in jazz as long as they remained within boundaries thought to be gender appropriate, such as vocalists, instruments thought to be feminine or ambiguous, in family or all girl bands, or as music educators. It was deemed inappropriate socially and economically when they played instruments thought to be masculine, such as brass instruments and drums. The female vocalist was important to the evolution of jazz because they were natural powerhouses with raw material. There was not much acknowledgement to the men. They were piano players, but on stage, she was the black woman. Women vocalists argued the power of jazz was to express the hope and struggle for freedom, which stemmed from its roots in the vocal music that stood at the beginning of the African American music tradition. In addition to being innovative vocalists, women were piano players. They were accepted participation in dance, jazz wives, and educators. Most important was the impact of the pianist, who was most widely acknowledged. Women's careers as a pianist in early jazz were hardly exceptional. Piano was one of the few roles and one of the best jobs available to black women in early days of jazz.
Mary Lou Williams was born Mary Elfrida Scruggs in Atlanta, Georgia on May 8, 1910. She grew up in the East Liberty neighborhood of Pittsburgh. Williams taught herself to play the piano at the age of 4 and never had any formal lessons. She played in her first public performance at the age of 6 and at the age of 15 joined a band. Williams was the only female instrumentalist to demonstrate the highest level of achievement in jazz circles. She wrote compositions performed by Duke Ellington, Dizzy Gillespie, and Tommy Dorsey. Williams was often told that she played like a man, very passive, but that did not stop her from becoming president of her own record company, becoming a swing-era pianist, or being commissioned by the Vatican to choreograph a piece performed by Alvin Ailey. Mary Lou Williams composed more than 350 works and had a boogie-woogie style of playing. In 1981, she passed of bladder cancer. Mary Lou Williams said, looking back at the end of her life, "I did it, didn't I? Through muck and mud." Long live the great Mary Lou Williams.
Billie Holiday was a true artist of her day and rose as a social phenomenon in the 1950s. Her soulful, unique singing voice and her ability to boldly turn the material that she confronted into her own music made her a superstar of her time. Today, Holiday is remembered for her masterpieces, as many of Holiday's songs are well known today as they were decades ago. Holiday's amazing voice is still considered to be one of the greatest jazz voices of all time. Holiday, born Eleanora Fagan, grew up in jazz-talented rich Baltimore in the 1920s. As a young teenager, Holiday served the beginning part of her so-called apprenticeship by singing along with records by Bessie Smith or Louis Armstrong and after-hour jazz clubs. When Holiday's mother, Sadie Fagan, moved to New York in search for a better job, Billie eventually went with her. She made her true singing debut in obscure Harlem nightclubs and borrowed her professional name, Billie Holiday, from screen star Billy Dove. Although she never underwent any technical training and never even so much as learned how to read music, Holiday quickly became an active participant in what was then one of the most vibrant jazz scenes in the country. She would move from one club to another working for tips. She would sometimes sing in the accompaniment of the house piano player, while other times she would work as a part of a group of performers. At the age of 18, and after gaining more experience than most adult musicians can claim, Holiday was spotted by John Hammond and cut her first record as part of a studio group led by Benny Goodman, who was then just on the verge of public prominence. In 1935, Holiday's career got a big push when she recorded 4 sides that went on to become big hits, including What a Little Moonlight Can Do and Miss Brown to You. This landed her a recording contract of her own, and then, until 1942, she recorded a number of master tracks that would ultimately become an important building block in early American jazz music. Holiday began working with Lester Young in 1936, who pegged her with her own now famous nickname of Lady Day. When Holiday joined Count Basie in 1937 and then Artie Shaw in 1938, she became one of the very first black women to work with a white orchestra, an impressive accomplishment of her time. In the 1930s, when Holiday was working with Columbia Records, she was first introduced to the poem Strange Fruit, an emotional piece about the lynching of a black man. Though Columbia would not allow her to record the piece due to the subject matter, Holiday went on to record the song with an alternate label, Commodore, and the song eventually became one of Holiday's classics. It was Strange Fruit that eventually prompted Lady Day to continue more of her signature moving ballads. Holiday recorded about 100 new recordings on another label, Verb, from 1952 to 1959. Her voice became more rugged and vulnerable on these tracks than earlier in her career. During this period, she toured Europe and made her final studio recordings for the MGM label in March of 1959. Despite her lacking of technical training, Holiday's unique diction, inimitable phrasing, and acute dramatic intensity made her the outstanding jazz singer of her day. White flowers worn in her hair became her trademark. Billie Holiday, a musical legend still popular today, died in an untimely death at the age of 44. Her emotive voice, innovative techniques, and touching songs will forever be remembered and enjoyed.
Hello, I'm Ella Fitzgerald. I was born in the great 1918 in Virginia, but I was actually raised as an orphan in New York. I was a very, very talented child. A lot of folks told me I was full of so much personality. My first appearance was at the Apollo Theater, where I was supposed to do a nice dance number. But to think, I actually won from my singing. After I chickened out for my dance, of course. My career set off after that. My career was long for 60 plus years. I would say that my career was very successful. I was most known as the Queen of Scat. As a woman, it was hard to get recognition compared to those lousy men. But against all odds, I did it. Being named the First Lady of Song, receiving 13 Grammy Awards, and over 40 million albums sold. I would say I was doing what they said women couldn't do. From the 15-year-old girl in reform school to conquering things that they said that I could never do. Even meeting great musicians. I believe one time I even met Louis Armstrong. You believe it? I was against all odds. But even with the issues of my health and the loss of many loved ones, I kept my heart in my music. The quote I went by was, I sing like I feel. And this is true. I use all the pain of losing various people around me and all the pain and hard times of trying to get the recognition and the money and the support that I deserve. When I got on that stage, I thought of all that anger and all the emotions. And I used my voice to tell my story. Had a lot of great ones. I was even in a couple movies. But my passion in singing got me a long way. And even though there's a lot of music that I can tell you about, here's just a little sample of what I've done. This is what we call scat. I was the queen of scat.
In 1941, there is a vacuum and its name is war. The big bands are stripped of band leaders, horn players, bass slappers. Anna Mae Winburn's band, the Cotton Club Boys, is picked over by Uncle Sam, and she is asked instead to lead the International Sweethearts. Anna Mae, billed as the Bronze Venus, is a woman cut for fashion, impossibly thin with high cheekbones, a petite waist, and a small but chic gap between her front teeth. During one of their oft-performed numbers, Jump Children, she stands in front of the Sweethearts, clad in a sleek black column dress, her hands a blur, shaping melodies with poise. She conducts, sings, and dances, sensual and in control as the music moves through her, for her. Anna Mae parts the air with delicate hands and bends toward the audience, her smooth voice confident and coy. But the girls are hot. Jessie Stone, who has worked with Duke Ellington and will later be credited as a pioneer of rock and roll bass lines, arranges their songs. Anna Mae continues to land some of the best talent behind the bandstand. Even if the Sweethearts are largely invisible to the white world, Downbeat magazine in 1944 calls them America's #1 all-female orchestra. Sometimes there are comedians and tap dancers out in front, or big names like Ella Fitzgerald, but the International Sweethearts can hold their own and get a crowd on their feet without any help. The Sweethearts frequently net greater applause than male groups in Battle of the Band competitions. In 1945, a letter-writing campaign earns the Sweethearts a 6-month tour of France and Germany at the close of the war. The band, some of the first black entertainers to travel for the USO, arrives clad in sophisticated uniforms. In 1947, the boys are back from war. Bands are getting smaller. The girls are tired of eating and sleeping on Big Bertha to avoid Jim Crow offenses, and some of them want to get married.